Okay. Hi, everyone. We're waiting for a few more people and then we'll start. Let's give it 30 more seconds and we'll kick it off. Hey, Lenka, we can see on the chat. Okay. I think we can start. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lior. I think I've met some of you. I'm Salto's VP Product. And with me today are Omri and Jeff from the engineering and customer engineering groups. Hi, thanks for joining. I'm personally super excited about today's session because it's the first of its kind. I hope there are many to follow. I hope to get you guys excited as well. You're all valued Salto customers in NetSuite. Some of you more veterans, some of you newer. And I hope to get you excited about the latest improvements that we added to the platform, and Jeff is going to show you today, and also about the future. Our product and engineering groups are always working on the next thing, bringing you guys more value, more features, more innovation, better experience. And I'm excited to show you all of this and to get your feedback as well. So I think we can start. We're going to divide today's session to 3 parts. Jeff will start by showing you a demo of the latest and greatest features, specifically how to deploy and promote using the latest pipelines feature. Then we'll dive into a few common pain points and tips and tricks around deployment. Some of you may know some of these, but we'll give it an extra detail. And finally, I'm going to show you a sneak peek of some upcoming platform improvements that we are actively working on. That's what the session is going to be about. Please feel free to ask any questions or give us any feedback throughout the session or later. Just email me. We'd love to get your thoughts and your feedbacks. Jeff, Omri, any thoughts before we go? Awesome. Jeff?
I'd just like to say that well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with everyone in the audience. I'm also really thrilled to be here with Lior and Omri, just because, being on the front lines all day long and working with existing customers and existing customer opportunities, it's really fun to once in a while get a chance to look at what Lior and Omri are looking at into the future. So I'm most excited for the latter half of this. But I also think it's important to review some of the features that might not be, blatantly obvious in your everyday. And so we want to kind of go through a few things that are new and have been released that might not be in your day-to-day routine yet. And then once we go through this, we're going to come back and review a few of these things that we've shown in the demo. So I'm going to show you a little bit about deployments and pipelines and filtering. We're going to get into a little bit of account specific value, conflict resolution, reverting of the deployments. Please do chat, put out your questions into the chat, and we'll address them as we go. Omri and Lior, if you can keep an eye on things, put your hand up if there's a question that you think that we can answer as we go. So just kind of recap with this typical flow of changes within NetSuite. Everything starts with a ticket. So we're using Jira here. Not everyone uses Jira, but lots of folks do. So everything starts with a Jira ticket. And once you have a Jira ticket, the NetSuite administrators or developers will go into NetSuite or go into VS Code, create the new functionality that's part of the request in the Jira ticket. And once it's all tested out, then it's time to take it from a development environment and push it into the next higher environment, typically a UAT, but sometimes directly to prod. We're going to show sort of a pipeline of a development to UAT to production typical scenario, right? So this is one of the newer features that we're wanting to show is this dashboard view of the work that's going on within Salto for promoting functionality. And as you can see here, there are oops, let me go back one there. There are three environments: my development environment, my UAT environment, and my production environment. And I can see them first of all, in their sequence about where I'm going to start and where I'm going to deploy to. And then I can actually, from this screen, go and initiate compare and deploy functionality, right? So instead of doing it from the old place where you go into the environments, you can do it right from this screen. So this screen becomes a real central place where a lot of the activity happens. Then we do the usual stuff. We select a source and a target. We put in the name of the deployment with the Jira ticket, because that's going to hook it all back together again later, as we all know. And then I'm going to start my deployment doing your typical compare and deploy. But I wanted to draw your attention to some features that I don't go into often enough in my onboarding processes. Things like the filtering the changes that are part of the screen. So this is 1,600 changes. There's a lot of changes to try and filter through and understand what you might want to select for this particular deployment. So I wanted to bring your attention to the changed by and changed at columns. So these columns, change by, change at, it kind of got pushed off the screen. Sorry about that. But this is a username or a date and time when these things were changed. So I can filter by those elements. On the changed at thing, we actually have another piece of functionality, which we'll go into at another time, and you can just ping me if you need to, which is change-based deployments, where we can pick a point in time and say, show me only the changes after that point in time. But this filter is also very, very handy. We can also look for filters that are within a bundle, maybe the ones that are inactive or locked. Those are just different ways of looking at these differences. So there's some kind of default filters that apply there. And then of course there's the usual filtering that we often go through in the onboarding sessions, which is like finding things that correspond to a particular set of activities, right? In this case, that was the back orders functionality. And we've all seen this functionality of selecting the elements that we want to include in the deployment. But I wanted to also remind everyone that the handling dependencies can be done right from here. So you don't necessarily have to open up things and look deep. You can always select these dependencies right from this screen and just say, I'm happy. I know what they are. I'm happy with them. There's just the one there. There's not 15 or 20. So go ahead and grab that one. If there's 15 or 20, but you understand what they are, it's a lot easier to select it here than having to go into each one. Any comments or questions so far, Lior, Henri? All good. All right, we'll keep rolling. Again, we go into the deploy preview. We have our usual. Well, not everyone here is using GitHub for managing the process. So in this case, we've created a pull request on GitHub. This is functionality you could turn on if you'd like, and that allows you to have a bit more control over what happens next. So we can see the changes that are being proposed in GitHub. If you'd like, you don't need GitHub. You don't need to know anything about GitHub if you don't know. But if you don't, or if you're not GitHub savvy, don't worry. This is just features you could leverage if you wanted to. And then, once we understand everything that needs to be deployed here, we do the usual, and we just click on the deploy button, and away we go, right? So at that point, once the deployment is finished, oopsie, what did I do there? Then we see all the deployment results. You're all familiar with this, and now we come back to the screen where the deployments where they're showing you the deployments in the preview pipeline. Sorry, and now I can see exactly what is being deployed and where things came from. So I can see that in this case here, this one. Oh no, sorry, I haven't gotten that far yet. I deployed this from development to UAT. So this is the back orders deployment that I just finished. And I'm deploying that from I just finished doing it from deployment to UAT. Now I want to take this one and also compose a couple of these things together. And now I can promote right from the screen. But not only can I can promote more than one at a time. So I'm selecting a couple of different Jira tickets to deploy, and I can click on the promote button. And what'll happen here is it will compose these two deployments together and then take them both up into production as a single unit. And so we're going to do the same old analysis that we always do. Occasionally, we're going to run into situations where there are conflicts. And so there are two different developers working on the same piece of code, for example, and we need to resolve those. And so this is some other functionality that is maybe not perfectly familiar to everyone. And so in this case, there's an address field, and I'm trying to say, hey, I want to call it deprecated, but it's already been set to not required. So it's sort of like this conflicting change where, I think actually I like the other person's wording better. So I'm gonna not use my wording. I'm just gonna say I'm gonna keep the target changes. So in other words, whatever happened in the target, the conflict, I'm comfortable with the one that they made. I'm not going to force my changes on them, but I have a choice. I could easily have said, nope, I like my changes better, and I would like to select those for the deployment.
Jeff, can I
Yes,
add
please.
something on
Yes,
this?
absolutely.
So this usually happens when you're doing these promotions a while after you got to UAT. So let's say you deployed a couple of things throughout the week to UAT, and then at the end of the week you have a release upcoming, and you wanna you have some change window, and you want to gather multiple deployments together that are already in UAT and then push them to production. But a few days have passed since you pushed them to UAT. And meanwhile, maybe things have happened in production. So when you promote changes, especially if you promote multiple deployments, this is pretty common. It's pretty easy to figure out what's going on. We're trying to make it easy. If we're not doing a good job, let us know. But again, it's essentially you're trying to deploy a change to your, in this case, production environment, but while you were preparing this change, somebody else touched the same area. And then you just have to make a decision. And as Jeff said, it's very simple. You either take what you've done and you override these changes, or you say, okay, I want the target to stay as is. There are some more complex scenarios. We'll talk about it later. Thanks, Jeff. Cool.
Yeah, no, thank you for the extra commentary. All right. So once we've selected the conflicts, the resolution that we would like to apply, we just apply that conflict resolution, and Salto will go back and do another analysis to make sure that we haven't messed up any of the dependencies or any other kinds of validations that might have been triggered. You might have seen the Salto validators. You can see here, I've got a column here that's all about Salto validations. There haven't been any triggered here, but Salto, having worked with the interface, the various interfaces of NetSuite for a long time, we've kind of gotten to know what works and what doesn't work. So we run some of those validations on your behalf to warn if there might be anything that could disrupt the success of this deployment. The other thing that you'll notice here is that production is protected from deployments. So we had a pull request created from development to UAT, but that pull request wasn't preventing the deployment. It was just an extra piece of documentation. In this case, we're actually preventing the deployment from occurring until an approval is gained. And in this case, in this time around, I'm gonna approve it from Azure DevOps, just to show you that we are Git agnostic. We can handle any of the different Git providers. In this case, I'm going to approve this from my Azure DevOps GitHub, Git repo. Once I've approved that, and I come back to Salto, you can see that now this is ready to deploy, and the deploy button has been lit up. Before we got to this stage, of course, the deploy button would have been grayed out, and I couldn't deploy it until an approval was achieved. So this is a way of protecting production from deployments that are not authorized. So it's a really handy thing to be able to manage when you're trying to implement a strict change management policy.
I'll also add that this pull request, especially when you're like at the gate before production, so approval is one super valuable thing you can put here. but you can also add to this any other kind of automation that you might want to run. If you want to run some kind of tests on UAT automatically when a pull request is going to production before it goes to production, or run any kind of external tool or internal script, this is the place. This pull request, which is being created on every deployment to production, you just use GitHub Actions or whatever orchestration you want to use to put a gate on it. We have customers doing just approvals or more complex automations. It's all possible.
Yep, absolutely. All right, cool. Then we just deploy. I've labeled this as a sensitive environment. Some of you might be using this feature, maybe not, but if you label something as a sensitive environment, it just adds an extra, are you sure button before you deploy. It gives you a bit of a description of what's going to happen. And then if I click on deploy now, Salto is going to do its thing. And we end up with a successful deployment, of course. We resync things locally, and once it's all synchronized, we can go look at the closed pull request. So now we can see the pull request is all complete. Now we come back to the pipelines page, and we can see now that this two deployments, this is what we call it. We probably should have named it something more descriptive here. But these two deployments here, you can see if I click on it, that if I hover over it actually, that the two deployments that this is composed of are highlighted back in the chain, so we can see what's in progress, what's complete, and if something has been complete, if it was composed of several different things, it'll show you those. It'll highlight those back through the deployment chain.
We have a relevant question from Tom. The question is, do we recommend just one dev environment for all developers or individual development environments for each dev before pushing to UAT? And does Salto work better with one workflow or the other? I'll start with the second part. Salto works with both ways. If you have individual development environment, it may be easier to locate your own changes when you're deploying. But even if you're using a shared one, using these filters, change by, change that, or just searching for your things, it's possible. You don't have to copy all the changes from dev to UAT when you deploy. So even if you're 3 developers, one just started working on something, but you just finished working on something else, there's no problem deploying just the part which is done from dev to UAT, and later deploying the other feature. Omri, Jeff, if you want to chime in on any of this or what we see with our customers. I think we usually see one development environment, but Jeff, I think you know better than me.
Yeah, in the NetSuite world, development environments are a little pricey from NetSuite. So typically there is 1 or 2 shared sandboxes that are shared among all the developers. Sometimes they're team specific or project specific, and so you have a second sandbox because there's someone doing some conflicting changes that make development of other things hard. So sometimes there are 2 sandboxes. They usually feed a UAT environment, which feeds production. So the only thing is, I think you might find different is that you might have another sandbox out here feeding UAT, and that could be again for these parallel streams of development that sometimes can be conflicting. Also in the world, I've noticed that there are a lot of unstructured use of sandboxes, and so Salto gives you an opportunity to make that structure real. Typically, the lack of structure in sandboxes is because that's the way that NetSuite developers and NetSuite administrators have come to the situation, right? So hey, we've got 2 sandboxes in production, so we use it as 2 sandboxes in production, but no one's ever thought about, hey, do we want to have a separate UAT, or what should our pipeline look like? Salto allows you to implement that structured approach without slowing things down. A lot of our customers, when we first talk to them, they're concerned about the velocity of their developers and the structure getting in the way. And always what we found is that the extra structure, along with the tools and the documentation that comes along with using Salto, for example, that in general, it kind of makes the velocity faster in spite of having more structure. So I would say that Salto gives you the opportunity to create some of that structure without without impacting velocity. In fact, quite the opposite. Great.
I
I
hope that
think that's
answers
it
your
for the
question,
demo.
Tom. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff. I think there's one more thing we wanted to show here. If you we can show just the things which
Oh, yes, that's right.
yeah,
That's right. Yeah, to
thanks.
clean up the view a little bit, we can get rid of the promoted elements. So I can show things that have been promoted in the past, but if I just want to look at work in progress, I can say, don't show me the stuff that's already been promoted. Just show me the things that have completed or are in drafts is actually another good one. So if we turn on the drafts, you'd see all the things that were in process show up. So it's a nice way of kind of selecting what you view on this screen to give you the right information about what you're trying to achieve. But keeping it clean if you need to, but having it as verbose as you like if you want. Cool. I think that was it for the demo, right, Lior?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll just come back in here and we'll do a kind of an overview of some of the things we talked about.
Okay, so I wanted to touch back on deployment filters. We talked about the changed by and changed at columns and filters, and you can even sort by it. There is one challenge. We have some limitations on the NetSuite side, so we don't have complete data on who changed what and when on the NetSuite front. We try to pull whatever we can, but know that some elements and some changes won't have these notations. An alternative which you can use, what Jeff showed was a regular compare and deploy, which compares to environments. An alternative you can choose is another deployment type. It's called find environment changes and deploy. And when you activate it, Salto asks you, okay, when did you change your environment? Let's say you're deploying from dev to UAT. You tell him, okay, show me all the changes from the last week in development. Then Salto computes all the recent changes the last week, regardless of this missing data. So we know how to calculate and show you just the changes which happened over the last week in your dev environment. And then you can select changes from that list to deploy. So you have two options here. If you want to compare to environments and select, you can use compare and deploy. If you really care about just showing the recent things, you can use the other deployment type called find environment changes and deploy. Another thing which Jeff showed you is the more advanced filters. So just know that you can filter by whether just show me active or inactive items. And you can also filter just items belonging to a specific bundle. So if you have two environments and you want to compare whether you have any changes in the elements belonging to a specific bundle, for example, that will probably show up differences due to version mismatches between bundles. That's really easy to do so. You just start a comparison between two environments, and then select this bundle filter and select a specific bundle, and you'll see all the changes related to that specific one.
Yeah, the other use case for that is when you've customized bundles as well. So if there's oftentimes the vendor will provide a bundle and then you will do some customization based on that bundle. And so this is a nice way of finding those as well.
Okay, Jeff, I think the next one is yours.
Yes, right. That's right. I'm in charge here of the slides. You're in charge of everything, but I'm in charge of the slides. So the other thing that I wanted to draw attention to was the handling of account specific values. So there are oftentimes when a workflow, for example, refers to an element in NetSuite, which depends on what environment you're in. If you're in a sandbox, the internal ID of a particular vendor might be 17, whereas in production, that same vendor is internal ID 25. And so when we run into situations where we know that's going to happen, like when that is due to happen, we can tell. In fact, NetSuite tells us, SDF will tell us that there is an account specific value that we will need to resolve. And in the past, what that's looked like is, and in SDF, for example, what that looks like is I've got to go into the target environment, find that vendor, take note that it's number 25, come back into my source environment and put the number 25 in there and have that deploy that way. What Salto's done is we're mapping those IDs and we're doing the computation for you. So we actually have references to many of the account specific values that NetSuite complains about. So, for example, vendors and accounts and things like that, where the internal values might be different. But since Salto has, through our fetch process, we have a really deep understanding of all of the configuration, and that includes some of these internal ID driven elements. Custom records is another great example. So we can actually do a resolution of those during deployment and fill those in for you. It's not universal. So we kind of are keeping our eyes open for customer-driven use cases where there's a use case we haven't solved for yet. So we expand this once in a while. We have extra functionality built into that. But this is a real time saver when it comes to doing, changing something on the fly during a deployment where the values are dependent on what environment you're looking at. Omri, is there any other commentary or anything else you could say about that?
Actually, you described it great. I will just add that account-specific value is something that we receive from NetSuite from their APIs. So like this is a given. This is the information that we have, and we built an extend mechanism to identify those. So it's much better than whatever you could achieve using SDF only or using the NetSuite original APIs. So this is like another layer of support that we added on top of it.
Yep, awesome. We in the past, this has been something that was challenging for us, for everyone, for SDF, for Salto to resolve. And I've really seen customers have a big benefit from this, just because it removes a lot of hassle around trying to do deployments that have this dependency.
Okay, cool. I wanted to touch a bit on conflict resolution. So usually you'll encounter it as part of your deployment preview. There are times where it's pretty rare. So if you do a regular compare and deploy, you probably won't encounter it. It happens essentially, we discussed this, when you request a change to some element, to some configuration from A to B, but meanwhile, something happened in the target. The value is something completely different. So Salto compares your change and the target environment, and sometimes we can't make the decision by ourselves. And usually the resolution is pretty simple. You either select your changes or the target that you say, okay, I want the changes to stay as they are in the target and not touch it. Sometimes you have more complex conflict resolution. For example, if you're trying to deploy changes to a suite script and you have some lines which are the same, some other lines which may have some conflicts, and then Salto pops up a more advanced conflict resolution mode, essentially letting you decide on like really specific on each change, whether to take your change, the target, or to do something completely different. So maybe during this kind of merge process, you can just select manual and do your own change. It's very similar to what developers do in the software world, but we tried to make it a bit more intuitive. Some customers prefer to completely avoid this, the conflicts, and they want a simpler way just to, instead of promoting and getting conflicts, they want to say, okay, I don't want to promote the exact changes that I brought. I just want to deploy the same elements again. So the elements which were promoted, take the latest and greatest changes to them and deploy these, regardless of maybe somebody else changed them meanwhile. In order to do that, there is functionality called reuse selection. You can see it on the deployments history screen as well. Yeah, so you can take a deployment which is finished and then just create a new deployment. For example, you just finished deploying something to UAT. You can create a deployment from UAT to production and ask Salto to reuse the selection. So instead of me reselecting manually all the things that I deployed to UAT, just let Salto do that for you. So that's an alternative if you prefer just taking the latest and greatest changes to what you just deployed.
That
I
is a
hope.
cool idea that I'd never thought of. So I have some customers that will benefit from that right away. I love that. So that's a great idea. Thank you.
That we talked.
Yeah. And then lastly, we didn't show you this, but we discussed it a little bit that if you're unhappy with the results of a deployment, you just click on the three dots to the right of that deployment in the deployment history screen. So if we're looking at the deployment history, there's the three dots menu. There's a revert selection that allows you to just undo that deployment, whatever it was. And so what we do is we take all the elements that were part of that deployment and all the operations on those elements, and we just turn them around backwards. It's not, you don't have an opportunity to select which ones you want to include and which ones you don't. It's going to take that whole deployment and undo it. So really handy for, oops, I didn't mean to do that, or geez, it didn't do what I wanted it to. I want to change it back to the way things were. This is a nice, easy way of doing that. Now, as is typical in NetSuite, there are some elements that are difficult. So workflows, for example, it's impossible for Salto to delete a workflow from a deployment. There's no mechanism for that. So there may be some parts of the revert that doesn't work. But at the very least, you'll have effectively a run book. So you could revert the deployment. It'll tell you which ones it was able to revert and which ones it wasn't. And those ones that it wasn't able to revert, you can use that as a run book to go and complete the reversion that way. Typically, though, for everything except for workflows, there might be a couple of other corner cases, but workflows is the primary one. Things like suite scripts and field changes and things like that, those are fairly sturdy and robust, but workflows are one of the cases where it's a little bit more difficult.
Awesome. Thanks,
All
Jeff.
right. I'm gonna now it gets really exciting. This is my favorite part of the day. So I'm gonna pass it back to Lior. Go for it, Lior. Let's just tell me when you want me to advance screens, okay?
Thanks. Before we go to the roadmap, there's one additional question. Is it pretty common to invite outside consulting companies who may be working on other features in our environment access to Salto? So is it common to actually give consultants access to Salto? Jeff, I think you can expand on that. As far as I know, it's pretty common.
Yeah, very, very common. We welcome it because those consultants usually go, wow, this is cool, and they tell their other customers about it. But yeah, absolutely. We very often have the consulting arm of a company, even if it's external, we give them access to Salto. Our Salto pricing model makes that very easy. So there's no extra cost for adding in some 5 or 10 consulting folks on the external side to using Salto. So there's no downside. And in addition, we typically find our customers who do that, depending on the kind of relationship they have. Sometimes the consultants they really do just handle everything. Other times the consultants, they want to have a bit more control over what happens. And so the customer will implement approvals to keep the consultants from being able to deploy directly to production. The auditors also like that a lot. And then other customers are where the consultant is more of a full-featured or full-service consultant. They just open it wide open. So there's a lot of opportunity to craft it the way it needs to be crafted to support the need.
And bear in mind that every person who actually deploys uses their own service credentials. So even if consultants are coming in, you defined exactly what kind of access they have on their credentials. So using Salto doesn't give them any kind of bypass to your usual security practices.
Yeah, excellent point. And the system notes will reflect the individual that was doing the deployment rather than Salto as a whole.
Super important for audits. Thanks, Jeff. That was a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, I wanted to share some things that we're working on. These are not like long-term roadmap stuff. I collected 4 things which are actively being worked on, and hopefully, if Omri's team does a good job, will be delivered over the next few months. Let's start with faster fetches. So today, when you fetch with Salto, when you grab all the configuration from the environment to Salto, you can either do a full fetch, which brings everything and might take some time, or you can do a custom fetch, and with pretty clunky UI, you can select what you want to bring. We wanted to make it better. So we're introducing a new fetch experience, we call it internally, which essentially streamlines the entire thing. So you go into the deployment and you select the things that you want to deploy, and with 2 button clicks, you can ask Salto, okay, fetch. I want to get the latest and greatest version of the things I'm going to deploy just before I deploy them. With 2 clicks, you can get Salto to fetch only these types. Specifically, you can fetch specific customization types, or even if we talk about file cabinet, you can decide to fetch specific files and folders or specific custom records. And it's all from a pretty intuitive dialog, which you see here on the screenshot. So it should really streamline your fetch experience. And what we're really trying to do here is reduce the time that it takes you to deploy something. In case you're deploying something which was just changed, this should make it much faster. Anything to add there, Omri? Okay, cool. Next up, ticket IDs. Great. So one of the things customers like when using Salto and NetSuite is the ability to associate changes with tickets, whether you're using Jira or ServiceNow or we have customers using Monday, but any kind of ticketing system that you're using to document these changes, which is always required for audits. We like users to use these ticket IDs in their deployments. This is something that a lot of you are doing today. In the deployment names, you're using the ticket IDs. So we wanted to make it even better, and we essentially extracted it. We extracted it from the deployment title to a unique and dedicated field. So you can now you'll be able to mark every deployment with the associated ticket IDs with this nice drop-down dialog, so you don't have to rewrite things time and time again. But we don't stop with deployments. You can even do that to fetches. So when Salto detects changes in your production environment, for example, this is what we call out-of-band changes, changes which were made on your production environment, but not using Salto deployments. You'll be able to take these changes, review them. We'll highlight these for you and attach ticket IDs to those fetches or to deployments. So the end result, which you can get today, but it will be much more streamlined and easy to get to. The end result is that every change in your NetSuite environment, whether it was made through Salto or directly in your environment, will be annotated with 1 or more tickets, which is great. And it really helps during audit processes. Jeff, Omri, there's another question. Maybe you want to address it. Any recommendation for forcing changes to be done through Salto and not the regular NetSuite UI? Does that all need to be done on the NetSuite user permissions?
Not sure if I understand the second part of that question, but for the first part, yeah, a lot of customers, this is another one of those things where it's like, you go to your administrators and you say, hey, we're going to remove your administrative privileges in prod because we're going to get much more streamlined and controlled. For our audit controls are being challenged and we need to make this change. And a lot of those administrators goes, oh my God, you can't make that change because that's going to slow me down. And then we show them Salto and how easy it is to get functionality from a development environment and say, look, go do all your development in a sandbox, and then do a quick compare and deploy and push that into production. That push into production will go through an approval process and then get allowed to proceed. So we're not going to inhibit your ability to operate within production, but we're going to make sure it goes through the process. So a lot of our customers take advantage of a process that doesn't limit velocity but does impose control. So that's how I would answer that. It's really I would say most customers in the NetSuite world are still at the very start of that realization, and really I think they've been negotiating with audit for many years in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And some of my customers have told me that this is sort of allows them to implement these controls that audit's been asking them to do, that have been reported as deficiencies in the past, and now they're able to no longer have that deficiency by implementing something like Salto. So yeah, absolutely, we do kind of recommend imposing a restriction on the use of production, and changes directly in prod will have to go through a break glass procedure, and then those changes themselves still get caught by Salto. So even if even if there was some out of band changes, as Lior mentioned before, those get caught during a fetch, and we can then document those and as document them as, for example, a break glass procedure was implemented for that particular change. Those sorts of stuff can be implemented as part of this control.
So I think the end goal is yes, try and limit it, but it's a journey. So you may want to start with more relaxed controls, and then when you feel confident with Salto deployments, start limiting these credentials.
Yep,
100%. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, just a quick preview of the new deployment preview. Jeff walked you through the demo. You saw that once you get to the preview, it can be a bit crowded. What's going to be deployed, what can't be deployed, the errors which prevent things from be deploying. We wanted to make it really easy to get like a zoom out, to get an overview of, okay, what is going to happen in my deployment? How many things will be deployed? How many things won't be deployed? And give users the ability to dive into each of these. So this is a relatively early version. You just see like big, clearly identified things, good things, bad things. And you see on the top right, this is an overview, but you can always jump to the existing Salto validations and elements to see a detailed dive into each one of these. So we just hoped that this will make it more clear to you guys what exactly is going to happen when I click deploy. Okay, one last thing, which I'm personally super excited about. You'll probably all get an email about this today or tomorrow. In approximately 2 weeks, we're going to introduce a really exciting new feature around security posture. So what Salto is going to do is to help you keep your NetSuite configuration secure and try to reduce risk to your organization by inspecting your NetSuite configuration. And when we have a bunch of detection rules, which look for places in your NetSuite configuration which decrease your security posture. And if we detect an issue, we will send you an alert about it to your email. And we can, on some issues, we even go all the way to offer you remediation and Salto-enabled remediation. So, for example, if you have in this example, we detected there's a privileged role which doesn't have two-factor authentication enabled on it. We'll send you an alert on it. And with 2 clicks, Salto, you'll be able to create a Salto deployment which fixes this issue. Together with this, we are also releasing support to a lot of new security applications. So if you have a security team which is using Okta, Entra, Cloudflare, CrowdStrike, Microsoft Defender, Jamf, there's really tons of security applications which we're introducing to Salto with this feature. So we're really trying to introduce into the change management process the ability to make sure that your changes are not hurting your security posture. This is super exciting for us. You'll see this live in your environments in a few weeks. Cool.
I gotta say, this is one of my favorites of the year. This is gonna be a really
the year is just starting.
I will try to answer to the question here. So there has been asked, why would you ever give a developer full admin access? To answer it, I will respond that it really depends on your pipeline or on your development pipeline. In many cases, you can see that the developer has full admin access on the lower environment in the pipeline, so in the development sandbox. and then there is the deployer is doing the changes. And then when you want to promote the changes to an higher environment, you would see that the administrator is the one that deploys using Salto. And then he will be the one that has the admin permissions. But it really depends on your internal organization and how you divide the permissions between the users. Anyway, we use the permissions of the user of NetSuite. So it's connected to a certain user in NetSuite, and we use those permissions.
Yeah, I'll just add to that um, customers typically want to have their developers accessing only the lower environments, of course. Sometimes they need to, like the question becomes, how do you actually, who does the deployment? And so with Salto, what Salto allows you to do is to go through the selection process as a developer or an administrator saying, hey, these are the things I would like to move into production. But that deployment is a shared entity, right? So everyone who's using Salto can see that deployment. And so when the deployment is ready for deployment, when all the selection is complete, the developer would then click on the preview deployment, and that would create the pull request. It would send an alert to the deployer. The developer is done. They don't need to do anything more to get something into production. Someone else has been alerted to do the actual work. And so the other thing to note about Salto is just sort of the idea that it's a tool that's shared across roles. The developers do the development piece and create the intention of what they want deployed through the selection of elements, and then they submit that intention for approval, and then the release team actually does the deployment after seeking appropriate approval. So yeah, there is the sort of that's the segregation of duties from a technical perspective. There's kind of two segregation of duties aspects. One of them is the functional NetSuite side, which the finance team cares about. The other one is the change management process and the segregation of duties there. Someone who creates code shouldn't be the one who approves and deploys the code. So our customers very often will separate that out. The developers express the intention. The intention is submitted for approval. The approval is gained, say, by a finance team member, and then the release team actually clicks the button to say deploy. So there's a bunch of different people who are acting there, and each can be enabled to do the things that are appropriate, but disabled from doing things that are not appropriate.
Okay. Any additional questions, feedback, thoughts? We'd love to answer any questions before we wrap things up. Okay. Jeff, I think you can jump to the...
Yeah, there it is.
You can jump even one more.
Okay. There we go.
Oh, there we actually do have a question. Okay. It's actually continuing that discussion topic. So Jeff, you can take it.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna step
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, smaller companies. Yep, it's often different in smaller companies. 3 people know UAT. Let's see. So UAT is in the sandbox where the dev of particular new features. Yeah. So this is very common in many NetSuite customers. The NetSuite has a big range of the size of customers, right? So yeah, sometimes there's one sandbox and one production, and sandbox is where the development happens, and it's also where UAT happens. That's fine if that's your process. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you use Salto to simply compare that sandbox to production and do the promotions to production that way. You can still impose things like an external approval from a finance team member, right? So sometimes the finance team wants final say as to what gets what is ready for deployment into the production environment. So you can implement something like that rather than having something a little less formal. You could implement some approval process there, or not. If approvals also is too formal for your process, and you do want to stay more nimble than that, that's okay too. This one then would just Salto really just helps you understand the differences between sandbox and production, and then take some of those differences and move them into production a lot more easily than with, say, bundles or copy to account or manually reproducing code.
Thanks, Jeff. Omri, anything to add? We're
Nothing
good.
from my side.
Okay, great. So with that, I think we can conclude the session. Thank you for attending. Jeff, thanks for the great demo and
Thank you for the invitation.
awesome answers. Omri, thanks you so much. I wanted to say that if anyone has any feedback or additional questions, we'd love to hear more. You know, we try to get this session is mainly about getting in touch with our users to get this feedback, to make sure that what we're building is what you need. So really feel free to email me. It's Lior at Salto.io. Just with any thoughts or feedback, we'd love that. It really helps us do the right thing. Thanks, Nikita, for the compliment. Great. All of these features, hopefully within the next few weeks and months, you'll see them in your environment. You'll get this what's new pop-up, and keep us posted on what you think about them. Jeff, Omri, thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you all. Thanks for joining this.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.